Hi guys, welcome back to another episode on Real Talk. I am Caitlin. I guess we're doing the podcast first. I started with that.
That's right.
Today we're here with Aaron, and we are going to be talking about his first property investment. So we're going to start it by, kind of setting the scene.
Yeah.
Where was it? When was it?
Yeah. Okay. So it was several years back, and when you get to be my age, years disappear. You can't tell years from decades. So anyway, let's say it was a decade back.
Okay.
Probably closer to a decade than a year. And it was in between Cincinnati and Dayton. So
Okay.
in our Fairfield, Hamilton area.
Okay.
So not too far from Southwest Ohio, essentially about
Yeah.
a decade ago. It was before real estate kind of boomed, prices
Yeah.
were crazy and all that fun stuff.
It was probably around 2012-ish.
That's close to that. Yep.
Okay.
I had owned real estate before, and I had flipped my own home,
Mhm.
moved in, renovated, and sold it for a profit, whatever. So I'd done that kind of thing.
Right.
I had even moved out of my own home and rented it for a year, but I had never bought a property before with the intent of it
Okay.
being an investment, right?
Okay.
So this was my first time I was going out of my way to research and
Yeah.
invest in a property
Okay.
as a money-making effort.
So now what kind of property was it? Was it single family, multifamily?
Yeah. It's the only time I've ever bought a condo.
Okay.
And so it was actually a apartment condo, whatever you want to call it, but shared roof, shared hallways, HOA fees, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So now what kind of planning was involved, if there was any?
Yeah, that's the fun part of the story, actually. I'm here sitting in this seat and running the Frag family of companies purely by luck, because that deal is kind of what defined my future in real estate investing.
Okay.
I had no plan whatsoever, and I got lucky.
That is-
It could have gone really, really bad, and I
Yeah.
would never advise anybody to plan on being lucky, but I did happen to get lucky with that
Yeah.
buy. So I was actually shopping for that property at a sheriff's sale. It was an
Okay.
auction conducted by the court. And I had been to a couple auctions before, and I was kind of doing my research on how that process worked by showing
Mhm.
up to them and kind of learning that process. And this property happened to be one I had gotten to the point where I was shortlisting and thinking through which ones would be good to move on. And that was one that I had kind of eyeballed.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I could get it, around this price or whatever, I think I could do okay on this one. But that's about as much as I planned.
Okay.
So I didn't think through an exit strategy. I hadn't decided if I wanted to rent it or sell it. Like, I had no idea. I just thought, that looks like it's selling for less than it's worth.
Yeah. Did you have any rehab budget in mind or anything, or did you have any idea what you
Not
wanted
at all.
to do?
So I'm kind of a do-it-yourselfer.
Yeah.
So I could do anything. Right?
Okay.
I've done all the stuff or whatever. And by that point in my life, I think I had put a beam into a second floor, and I had laid floors and installed windows and doors and
Yeah.
electrical and a little bit of plumbing. And so I thought I could do everything, and I was invincible. So I gave very little thought to rehab budget, to be honest, because I kind of discounted the most expensive part of it. What often is the labor, and probably underappreciated what a big deal that could be.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I did not prepare well at all in this property.
Yeah. So now with sheriff's auctions, you don't really get to see what the property looks like before. You get to see
No.
what's online, and that's it.
That's right. So I don't even know if I had done I think I had done a drive-by in the area.
Okay.
But the unit itself was positioned in a way that I couldn't even get in and peek in the windows without being really imposing and stuff. So I hadn't seen much of this property at all.
So then what was the end result after you purchased it and everything?
The purchase is actually kind of the fun part of the story. So
Okay.
I go to the sheriff's auction, and I think it was a $36,000 opening bid.
Okay.
And I had been to a couple of sheriff's auctions already. And so I had seen what happens. These things get bid up and blah, 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 right? And I thought, well, maybe I'd never bid on anything at an auction before. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do the first bid.
Yeah.
That way I can kind of get the jitters out. I can just
Yeah.
walk that off essentially and just work out the nerves or whatever of building up my courage to bid. And the first bid won the property.
Oh,
So I
nice.
did the opening bid. Yeah, it was good and bad. Bad because I didn't even have my checkbook on me. Like I was not prepared to buy this property at all. It was a real hack job.
Yeah.
So I literally bid $36,100 or whatever the minimum bid is, and sold to Aaron Davis.
Dang.
And so I literally had to go to the bailiff or whoever it was that she was running that auction, and tell her like, hey, I live 40 minutes away. Forgot my checkbook. I'll be back. And she's like, okay, I'll hold this for an hour. I think she gave me 2 hours or something.
Oh, dang.
And I made it back, wrote her a check. Had to go to the sheriff's auction to write her a check and deliver it. That whole fun thing. But I had no intent of buying that property at all. I was really just trying to bid for the sake of practice or something,
right?
To try to kind of sentimentally get that fear out. And I ended up buying this property. And to this day, I don't know why nobody else bid on that property. People didn't like to mess with condos or whatever. The right audience wasn't there, but I did great on the property.
Oh, nice.
It was a woman who had moved out into an assisted living. There was some junk left behind, but it was actually in great shape. I mean, I cleaned the carpets, painted the walls, moved in renters. It was the easiest acquisition I've ever done.
That is pure luck.
It was pure luck. I think I spent less than $1,000 to flip it or whatever and get it move-in ready for a tenant.
Wow.
And it rented overnight. No problem with, they lived there for 2 years and paid rent steadily. And I decided to sell it after that.
So then once you got in it and kind of, saw what it was that kind of when you made your exit strategy decision? Or did you ponder on it a little bit?
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So when I realized that there was really not much to put into it, I guess at the time I thought, well, I don't have to put a bunch of money into it. So why don't I just collect the rent?
Right.
And I don't need to get cash back out to, pay off some other, I don't know. Really, I had no good rationale. I didn't understand the 1% rule. I didn't have a target for profitability or cap rate or cap. I was really just kind of shooting from the hip there. And lucked out because that is not how you win in real estate. You win in real estate by having an exit strategy from the beginning, doing the math up front and sticking to a budget, right? But what I lucked out in, Caitlin, was that it didn't get bid up to what it was really worth.
Yeah. And
the property it didn't need any love, any attention or work. So I really lucked out. And then, who wouldn't fall in love? It's like going out to golf for the very first time and hitting a hole in one. Who wouldn't come back and learn how to play? You know what I mean? So, so I crushed that one by pure luck. Just Happy Gilmore that thing. Whacked it, fell right in the hole, and then kind of fell in love and did a bunch later and didn't do as well as easily. But figured out how to win.
So then the emotions geared towards that, were like you're saying, the Happy Gilmore, the happy feeling, everything, you were excited for the next one. I know this podcast, we're supposed to be talking about the first one. How did your second one go?
How did my second investment go? Ooh, I have to think about what my second one was. Okay. Yeah, so the second one, it's interesting. I think I got the itch then. I loved it then.
Yeah.
Right? And I actually did not do great on the second one. I made a little bit of money. I flipped it.
Okay.
I also bought it at an auction. I did a lot of the work myself, so my cost was modest. But I ran into surprises in the property. My second one had mold in the basement and cat pee smell everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And it had a lot of stuff. It needed to be rehabbed from top to bottom, right?
Yeah.
So that one ended up being kind of barely got away with a few bucks investment. And what it really came down to is I didn't plan all those expenses in advance,
right?
And then set myself a good threshold at the auction, and a walk away number. I just kind of let it go wherever it went. I bid too high and paid too much at the acquisition.
Okay, so based on both of those, what did you learn from them?
Yeah, so I guess two really important lessons, right? In the first one, I learned that there's a ton of money to be made in real estate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you show up at the right time you can really win. And that is true. I might have gotten lucky. I might not have done my homework, but I made the acquisition.
Right.
I rented the property for 2 years at a really good rate. And then I sold it for a nice profit, I mean, I did great on that property.
Yeah.
So that, despite the fact that it was lucky, it is true. Sometimes you do get lucky.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hit a little arbitrage of sorts or whatever, and you capitalize on being in the right place, the right time, and grabbing things below market, right?
Yeah.
And rolling up your sleeves and putting a little sweat equity into it,
yeah.
right? So those wins are out there, and I'm glad I learned that early, because I think if I had bought that second one, I would have learned those hard lessons first and might have been turned off to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those hard lessons obviously were know what your ceiling is before you make an acquisition. Don't negotiate with yourself late into that process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I should have known that, 150 was my number. Instead, I was like, 159. Well, and that's $9,000 I lost. That I could have put that money elsewhere, right?
Yep.
And so, being prepared, learning how to budget, costing things out in advance. Those are the hard lessons I learned that second time. Didn't have as great of an experience, and I'm kind of glad those lessons came in that order.
Right. Yeah.
Because I still knew there was juice out there to be had, right?
yeah.
But I knew that, obviously I was going to have to be more disciplined in order to grab a hold of it more consistently. So.
Right. And I'm glad the second one didn't scare you away. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today.
No, true. True. It wasn't too bad. It was
right.
Okay.
So now at the auctions, were there a lot of people there, or was it just like, a few in between, or?
Auctions over the last couple of years are barely worth showing up. Everything's getting bid up over retail and whatever else. But back then, it was a modest showing, and it was sporadic.
Okay.
So sometimes there'd be 10 people there. Sometimes there'd be, 40 people there.
Okay.
And you could kind of tell whether or not you were going to walk away a winner by how many people showed up. But it was real hit or miss at auctions when I was going to them back. That was years ago. But when I was showing up to those things back then, it was real hit or miss. Sometimes you'd grab some winners, and you'd see people get away with winners.
Yeah.
That you maybe didn't do your due diligence on, but you could kind of tell that one went away lower than you had expected. And then some days it was like everything was just getting bid to the max. And that's a day where you just, take your notes and move on.
Now, some properties, they do have maxes, don't they? Or is it just until no one bids?
The max is when people stop bidding.
Okay,
right?
That's what I wasn't sure. I know.
They have minimums. Oftentimes they'll start with different courts have different rules, but 2/3 the appraised value is a common starting point.
There was, before we put my significant other and I, Cole, before we put our property under contract, we were looking at a house that was going to go up for sale in an auction. And we were like, okay, well, let's, drive by the property. Well, we ended up driving onto the property, which you're not supposed to do, but we did. It was vacant, and we start looking through the windows. It was on 6 acres of land. I think the starting bid was $100K.
Okay.
So it was on 6 acres, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, I think. So we start looking through the all the windows, and it's just like filled, like up to the window. Right? Oh, it was awful. And then the back door happened to be unlocked, so we
you got the deeper lock. Huh? Lucky you.
We went to open the door, and we couldn't even open the door. It was like
so much junk in there. Huh?
It was bad. And so, we sat on it for a couple more days, and we kept going back to the auction site and seeing what we wanted to do. We ended up passing on it just because we were like, 6 acres is a lot for our first home.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that was what we were going to do. We were going to buy it to live in for a few years, and we would sell. But we were like, there's no way this thing is going to like sit at $100K. There's no way it's going to go.
Do you know what it got bid up to?
I don't. I tried looking it up the other day and finding it, but I drove past it because my parents, they actually live in the area. I drove past it last week, and it still looks vacant. So I don't know if it ended up selling and whoever bought it just hasn't done anything with it yet, or what ended up happening with it.
Usually takes a month or so, but yeah. I've seen some doozies. I bought a property once that was also full of junk. In fact, somebody had been murdered in that property.
Oh, wow.
I think there's conflicting stories, actually. I think one party, the police investigated it or whatever. And this is just gossip from neighbors or whatever. But somebody said it was a suicide, a murder, but something tragic happened.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like I literally had to attend to a bullet hole in the wall.
Oh, gosh.
As part of the rehab, right? And then there was a transmission, like a literal car transmission, like in the dining room, along with all kinds of other stuff, dog feces, whatever. There was also like a $3,000 piece of gym equipment, like a big universal gym in the garage that's still in my basement gym to this day because it was the most valuable thing at that property. It was pristine. It was like it had just been bought brand new.
Dang.
So I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah.
Christmas present or something that never got used. I don't know, but that was a great little gem to find. But otherwise, the place was a total wreck. It's kind of crazy the things you run into when you buy at sheriff's auctions because there's always obviously really bad circumstances that lead to that. So you can find some weird stories, that's for sure. Not really, my preferred method after learning other ways of making acquisitions or whatever. But it made for some interesting stories. Yeah,
that was going to be my next question. Is if you're still involved in investing in real estate, and if so, what is your kind of go-to strategy with everything that you've learned?
Honestly, now I would just buy one of our turnkey properties.
Okay.
I mean, it's honestly, that is, as I'm shopping, I'm looking at our inventory and I'm buying what our customers buy, right? Yeah. And that's the go-to approach for me. Because somebody else has already done the costing, whatever else, you put your markup on it, I don't care. You know what I mean? That's a worthwhile investment for me. Yeah. It's really the cash flow. And so the way I analyze a deal is different now. I'm not looking at a property that's below market. I'm just looking at cash flow. That's a maturing factor, right? I mean, a good deal to me is one where I know the money in is going to be less than the money out. The money out is what I'm buying. So that's probably where my go-to, first stop, first look or whatever would be, because I'm a little more hands-off at this point. I like the idea of somebody else having done the due diligence, done the homework, put the renter in, blah, blah, blah. That's my move as I've gotten old and lazy. I'm just buying money, right? At that point, right? Sheriff's auctions are still interesting. You can still get lucky, but like I said, the last few years, with home prices going crazy, inventory being so low, it's an army of people showing up and bidding everything up, and there's too much risk in that. So I haven't paid any attention over the last 4 or 5 years or whatever. It hasn't been a good place. Yeah, and so I don't know how it was when you went, but like the example I was just talking about when we were looking at that one. The auction date, I don't know when it was uploaded, but the auction date was set for like a month and a half down the road. Yeah. Was that pretty typical? That's pretty common,
okay. I didn't know if it was like, if it's changed because of the demand for it, if now they're like prolonging it more to get more people interested.
It's pretty common. COVID messed that all up. They didn't do auctions for a while. And, there was a bunch of different transactions or transitions that happened in that whole space over the last couple of years. But it's not a predictable... Like you said, because you can't always see the property, it's hard to do your homework in advance like you should. I had my method eventually. I figured out my method for guessing. But if you don't have a pile of cash as a buffer, you're not going to be 100% right in that scenario. Yeah. Where you can kind of get close to that when you're walking the property and you're seeing the finishings and the materials that are used and able to add up a real rehab cost. Yeah. You can't do that if you can't get in the property. Right.
I think that's
you kind of look in a window and see a kitchen,
right?
You're big, but you can't see the furnace in the basement,
right? So, exactly. I think that's something to kind of point out, and I think you and I have actually talked about this before on the different types of investors. Whether you want to be active or passive or kind of in between. Yeah. Is you started going the active route, and you were very hands-on. You even did the rehab yourself.
Right. I did the renting myself. I managed the tenant relationship myself. All that stuff. I showed up and changed out the garbage disposal, right? Like I was the handyman.
But then on the flip side of things, you can do the turnkey route, which everything is done for you. And even at that option, at least in Ohio, and this might even be a little biased, but the prices, the ARVs are a lot more attractive than other markets, in my opinion. They're a lot more affordable, I think.
That's another way that I got lucky. And a lot of investors don't. Is that I happened to be messing around in real estate, experimenting in a market where, that the cost ratio is advantageous to an investor, right? Dayton and surrounding areas are a really good rental market.
Yes.
Right. So buying a property that can rent well to cash flow it's easier to stumble into it here. So if I had been doing that in a different city where those price ratios were not as good, I would not have fared as well. Yeah. Right. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's one of the biggest mistakes that investors make, thinking that their own backyard is the best place because they're close. Yeah. But your rent and home value ratio is way more important than how close you are.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So anyway, I got lucky in that regard. We happen to be in a great market here. And it's just, through a series of coincidence or whatever that I happen to be sitting here. And why now my move would be, 8% cash on cash. Okay. A property manager with a great reputation and knows their stuff and a good maintenance team here locally. Okay.
Right.
Looks like a move to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Especially all under one roof too.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, it really is. I mean, we've talked a lot about this recently.
Yeah.
That this isn't supposed to be sales.
No, not at all.
Like building and delivering what we would buy.
Mm-hmm.
Just had that conversation with Steve this morning, our rehab director, and about, we were talking about a tactic or whatever. Okay, I'm the buyer now. How would I like that approach?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like it if this, and I would like it if that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That's what we'll do then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway.
I think even doing that, like in a rehab itself is, what are the kind of things I would like, to an extent, you don't need to do like the granite countertops or anything, but like, what's modern right now, what's going on,
true.
Things like that.
True. Yeah.
So
thinking about it as your home, there was a point in time where I was at that price point, right? And I was renting and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about that when I get out into the field, put a lockbox on something on my way home or whatever, and I look at this property, I'm like, if I was going to move my family in here and rent this property, what would I want it to look like?
Yep.
I'd want this hedge out of the way.
Yep, I do the same thing.
Right.
So did you do that with your first investment? Did you put yourself in their shoes or?
Yeah, I did. Like when we painted the walls or whatever, and I did a couple fixtures and whatever else, it was pretty minimal, like I said. But I thought, you know what? This is a good looking place. I would rent this. Mm-hmm. More decisions like that were made on the second one. That was all problematic, and I had to completely rip it apart, and the subsequent ones. But yeah, that second one was interesting because it was a home that would have been it was a retail flip. So I bought it, renovated, and then sold it. Mm-hmm. It is a home that could have been my home, right? Yeah. It would have been comparable to a home I was living in. And so I definitely thought a lot like that. You got to be careful too, though, because sometimes you get a little dreamy about what's uniquely valuable to you that's not consistently valuable to everybody. So there's aspects of that that are useful, and then aspects of that are just expensive for no reason.
Right. So now what made you, between your first and second one, what made you on the second one decide to go that retail route? Was it just the luck of the draw, or? That's
a good question. I think I intuitively did I was doing a form of, cap rate analysis at the time where I'm looking at the money I put into it. And I'm thinking, if I rented it, I could get this much. If I just sold it, then I'd have this much.
Okay.
And so it was crude, and I'm doing it on my cell phone calculator and not in a pro forma or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But it was still true.
Yeah.
It's still a basic, rate of return ratio that I added up to decide that wasn't one I was going to try to rent.
Okay.
Like, that's not a property that I knew I could sell it for $250,000, but I couldn't rent it for $2,500 or whatever.
Okay.
Right? And I didn't know the 1% rule, but I knew in my head that I needed this much in order to make it worthwhile to me.
Right.
So I did a crude version of that, an early version of that. That was, one of the first, principles or whatever that I kind of learned is differentiating it as a rental prospect versus a retail prospect. The thing I do better now is I think about that before I buy it. Right? Yeah. Back then, I was just like, I'm halfway into rehabbing it. Like, I made no decisions about what kind of countertops I put in or what kind of carpet I put on based on whether it was going to be a rental or a retail sale or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
It was just, I'm hacking at it, and somewhere along the way, I'm like, I think I'll go ahead and redo this floor, and then maybe I can sell it for a little more.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I don't have any questions. I think that was really good. I learned a lot. Do you have any?
That was a trip down memory lane, that's for sure. Some hard lessons.
So do you have any, kind of final words on, your experiences or what you would want first-time investors doing, whether they're going the active or passive route?
Yeah, so maybe the most important thing, particularly for investors who are not here locally in Dayton, Ohio, or the surrounding area, Cincy, Springfield, whatever, is don't buy a property in your backyard just because it's in your backyard. Mm-hmm. Shopping the right market where the price ratio, the value of the property, and the rent ratio is good, is going to give you a better prospect for winning. And doing that requires you to have a great property management partner.
Yes.
So vet those things.
Mm-hmm.
Vet your rent ratio and your property manager. Those are two big things that I got lucky on, that investors throughout the country and elsewhere are not going to get lucky on.
Yeah.
So if you're like a first-time investor or whatever, do your homework on your property manager, do your homework on your rent ratio.
Yes.
That's a good place to start that you probably won't get lucky on. So so start there, and that's chapter 1.
Of many.
That's right. That's chapter 1. And that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Well, this was good. I'm excited to get this one out to the world so you guys can all hear this one. I don't have anything else.
That'll do it.
All right. We always like to end these with invest smart.
And live happy?
Yes.
I promise.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on this show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.